We're going to continue the second part of the Intro to Operations Management by taking a look at the significant events in M1 over several years, actually centuries. And if you look at this diagram, you can see here that way back in the 1700s, some major contributions were being made to the field of operations management. We had concepts such as labor specialization, the use of standardization of parts. All of those things were actually designed to lower costs and improve efficiency and productivity. Assembly lines, use of statistics, linear programming, process analysis, queuing theory. All of these tools and techniques were developed in that time frame, somewhere between 1776 and 1980. And then we moved into the big quality era in the 80s and the 90s, where we were talking about lean production, just-in-time systems, computer-aided design and manufacturing, electronic data interchange, total quality management, and so forth. So that period lasted until about the mid to late 90s, and then of course we move into people wanted large volumes but more customization, so we move into something called mass customization, which was a technique that really moved away from this idea that if you wanted a lot of volume, you could not be very flexible. You could not have variety at the same time. And technology allowed us to consider designing a part or product in a very modular way. And then just by simply changing the modules, you actually could create the perception of a new product. So I could have 6 Apple computers looking all alike in front of me because the chassis are the same, but I've changed the hard drives, I've changed the motherboard, I've changed the memory capacity and all those sorts of things internally, which we don't see. But all those things are modules that are just usually used to assemble the product. All right? And so we could certainly mass customize, give both volume and variety in terms of product design. Of course, with the field of one, there are challenges, and we've seen challenges over time from, do we just stay national or do we go global? Do we produce in large batches or small batches? Do we just go for the lowest cost supplier, or we create partnerships with suppliers? Do we want to take 5-10 years to design a product, or do we want to design in 6 months? And then do we standardize everything, or we say, oh no, we could create some flexibility by using mass customization? Or do we want everybody basically focusing on a single job function, or we want to enrich employees by giving them some empowerment and allowing them to be able to do multiple functions at the same time? All right. So these are some of the challenges that we've seen creeping in the field of OM, creeping into the field of OM over time, and then of course increasing the complexity of the management of operations at the same time. Characteristics of goods and services is an important thing to discuss because the nature of a good and or service has implications for how you manage operations. So with goods, they're usually tangible, consistent. You produce them in a factory somewhere hidden out, in the boondocks. You could inventory the stuff in a distribution center or warehouse, and then the customers know where to be seen until they actually purchase the product. I never touched the Samsung Galaxy Tab 2 until I bought it. I don't know where it's made. I couldn't tell you where it's made. In terms of the characteristics of service, it's usually intangible, unlike goods, which are tangible. Produced and consumed at the same time. So if you have a dental hygienist cleaning your teeth, they're producing that service for you, and you're consuming it because you're part of the whole service environment or the whole service structure. Okay, it's often unique. So what is done and what a dentist do for you is not necessarily the same thing a dentist will do for somebody else. You may have a root canal, the other person might have an extraction. High customer interaction, because of the fact that you're usually the customer is usually part of the service. The product definition is inconsistent. So what might be good for one person may not be good for another. And not only that, even when you go back, you say, it was not quite the same like the last time. Sometimes you go to a favorite restaurant and you're really excited and you say, a group of friends, come on, let's go, let's go. And then when you get there, only to find out that the service was actually quite different. So there's inconsistency in the product definition. Often there's some knowledge component, and the service is frequently dispersed, could be geographically dispersed as well. Changing challenges. We've seen challenges where at one point we're just talking about, well, do we regulate up front or do we wait until we see the damage before we regulate, to now emphasis on the importance of being professional, being responsible, ethical, and so we want it all up front nowadays. Local versus national focus, well, yeah, that was cool, but now we're talking about global. But when we're global, are we collaborating with across international boundaries, or are we collaborating even within that environment where we have offshored to? Okay, so there are a number of these types of challenges that we see creeping up all the time, from low-cost production of little concern for the environment to environmentally sensitive green manufacturing, what we call benign manufacturing, okay, clean manufacturing. These are all the same things. Low-cost standardized products moving to mass customization and so forth. So the trends, are lots of trends in operations. Operations systems traditionally were designed to be productive. They had to try to produce the goods and or services as cheaply as possible, as productively as possible. So it is not uncommon that when we get into operations management, we are interested in examining how productive that system is. And so productivity is the ratio of outputs, that is goods and services that we produce, to the inputs, the resources that we consume to produce it. And so if I'm making 100 widgets per hour, and so let's just say 100 widgets, and it took me 5 hours to make it, then I'm making 20 widgets per hour, and that's my productivity rate at this point. All right. Now you have what we call single factor productivity, where the input that you're considering is just a single factor. So if I just look at it in terms of labor hours, then I have 100 units in 5 hours, 20 units per hour. But what if instead I actually price the hours and say, okay, 20 units per hour, but that hour is worth $20. So that's basically 20 units for $20. And that's a different productivity measure, but in terms of dollars. What if we use dollars as a common measure and we include a few more resources such as labor, overhead, rent, transportation, energy? If we added more of those, then we get what we call a multi-factor productivity measure, and we will see that a little later on. This system that's in front of you actually looks very much like the same system that you'd find at the level of an organization, where we typically have labor, capital, and management input, and we're trying to transform those inputs into some service. So let's say we were running a workshop on operations strategy. Well, some of the inputs would include the participants, the material. If this workshop provides refreshments and nutrients, then that's also part of the input. The facility, the classroom, any technology, that equipment that we need. So there's some broad categories that we could use to classify all those things. Labor is usually one. Capital, where money is needed. The management, which is what are the policies that we're using. People. We already said labor. So there's methods, there's machinery, the equipment. Yeah, that's right. The other part is includes equipment as well. Now, when we transform those inputs, well, you actually have all the classroom processes, the facilitation, the exercises that are done. All of those things are part of the transformation process, because the goal is to really enlighten the participants. And then on the output side, you've produced participants who've been educated, who've been exposed to some new techniques and so forth, and they are now better prepared to go on and apply these ideas in their workplace. So that's on the output side of the, and hopefully you get improved performance in the long term, which is some of the outcomes. So outputs generate outcomes, all right? There ought to be a feedback loop, because you need to be able to determine to what extent that the goods and services that you're producing meet your expectations. And if they don't, then two things may need to change. Either the specs need to change, or three, or your transformation system is not working properly, or you don't have the right inputs. And so you could certainly look at making some changes. Trying to improve productivity in the context of service is usually not that easy. Sometimes it's difficult to even measure. One of the ways we look at the productivity is throughput, how quickly we could serve customers and so forth. How long does a particular transaction take? So how many transactions per minute? So some of these, like in a bank, for example, what's the average rate of serving customers? If somebody's opening a check, well, how many of those can we do per hour? We could get a measure of productivity of whatever process is being used. So let's just take a look here at productivity at Starbucks. And some of us actually drink Starbucks coffee. Well, to improve productivity, that means getting more people in the facility and out of there as quickly as possible. So you want to reduce your labor input for the same level of service. So stop requiring signatures on credit card purchases under $25. Change the size of the ice scoop, so we might be able to actually do more in less time. New espresso machines that are likely more efficient, faster, and as you could see, the new espresso machines save 12 seconds per shot. And you might say, well, that's not much, but add that up over how many shots you do per year, you'll find a significant savings. 14 seconds per drink by changing the size of the scoop. And you could actually cost that out as well, all right? So the operational improvements have increased revenue per outlet by almost $200,000 to $940,000 in 6 years. That's significant. So the definition I mentioned to you of productivity was units divided, produced divided by the units used, so essentially outputs to inputs. And it measures the process improvement, represents output relative to input. Only through productivity increases can our standard of living improve. That's true. When you go to some economies that are not very productive, you see lower wage levels. Those that tend to be more productive tend to have higher wage levels. All right. Your productivity calculations are fairly straightforward, and I mentioned to you the single factor productivity concept, and this is one, just the units are produced for the labor hours used. And when we go to multi-factor productivity, we take the same output, but we'll include some other factors such as materials, energy, miscellaneous capital, labor inputs, and so on. And you could compute the values, right? And we have a sample problem that was given to you in here. So apparently this simple example shows some changes in terms of the old system, old and new system. So in the old system, you have staff of 4 work 8 hours a day, so it's a total labor of 32 hours, and payroll cost is $640. They produce 8 titles per day, and overhead is $400. So if you take the 8 as the output divided by the 32 labor hours, you get 0.25 titles per labor hour. But then for the new system now, you now could produce 14 titles with an overhead of $800 a day. We'll assume the payroll costs are the same because we've not changed the workers. So now you could get 14 over 32, 0.4375 titles per labor hour. Right? And then if you want to go to multi-factor productivity, then you see for the old one, the output was still 8 divided by the 640, which is your payroll cost, the 400, which is your overhead cost. So now you have two factors in there, overhead and payroll. And that gives you 0.007 titles per dollar. And then if you do it for the new one, well, now we have 800 a day. So 640 plus 800, 14 titles per day. And we see the new multi-factor productivity level happens to be slightly higher. All right? And those things come with a series of problems of their own. So if you want to improve labor productivity, and it's usually quite difficult, not that easy to do, but here you are, here's something that can be done. Basic education appropriate for labor, the right kind of diet, social overhead that makes labor available, and the challenges in maintaining and enhancing skills in the midst of rapidly changing technology and knowledge. So as you're trying to bring about some modicum of change in your labor force, you have new technologies on the horizon, making life tougher. What are some of the things that you could do for service productivity? Well, it's typically labor intensive, so if you want to improve productivity, you need to focus on trying to improve the productivity of the labor. Frequently focus on unique individual attributes or desires, often an intellectual task performed by professionals. So these are some of the things that help to pose some of the challenges. Difficult to mechanize and difficult to evaluate for quality. Taco Bell did a number of things, revised its menu. When it revised its menu, if it made it smaller, it meant that you had greater standardization, which allowed it to be more productive. Design meals for easy preparation. Rather than doing prep on the site, they prep off-site. Make sure that you have efficient layouts so that you could move around your facility as quickly as possible, saving time. And then, of course, you train and empower your employees so that they know exactly what to do. And then, you look at some improvements or small innovations in equipment. All of that actually help. And the results, preparation time cut to 8 seconds, management span increased from 5 to 30, install labor costs was cut for 15 hours per day, store handles twice as much volume with half the labor. So these are some really, really good productivity improvements. All right. So I think that we've gotten a pretty good sense of the contributions that OHM has made to adding value to our society, and why it's important as a core function in any organization.